in the Kelly School at Indiana University's Department of Business Economics and Public Policy. We have 4 presentations this morning that are dealing with a broadly defined as an important national and international issue of global supply chains and development, especially in the post-financial crisis world, and some of the key implications for that as we move forward into further into the 21st century. So we have 2 speakers here from Zhejiang University and 2 speakers from Indiana University that will be part of this panel. And then we're very privileged to have a discussant, Matthew Neff, who will provide some overview, and then we want to have some time for questions and answers from the floor. I've asked each of the speakers to try to limit their remarks to approximately 10 minutes each, focusing on their main conclusions and opinions and findings. And now we'll move on and still have some time for discussion. Okay, without any further ado, let me have Yi-Chung Gu will be our first presenter. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman, and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Chun Hui Yen from School of Management, Zhejiang University, and I'm very pleased to have an opportunity to participate in this very good and terrific workshop. And this is my last year's research. I just talked with Professor a few minutes ago that this time I think that a lot of presentations they have based on their individual research, and I hope next time we can have some joint research, joint Zhejiang University, Indiana University, and single US research. I think that could be terrific. So let's start. My topic is the local government, entrepreneurship, and the development of the rural industrial clusters. As we know that Zhejiang University is a tiny, very tiny province in China, and it's one of the richest province in China. How could Zhejiang do that? You know, it's one of the poorest natural resource province in China, and entrepreneurship, as all the people believe that, play a very important role. This is Zhejiang, and population, GDP, and we can see that the annual growth rate is terrifically high, and also we can see that the per capita income is also pretty good. We can find that in China, in this very tiny province, we have more than 300 industrial clusters. We can give you the number. Almost 50% output of the Zhejiang province coming from the industrial clusters is about nearly $400 billion US. This is the name of the industrial clusters. We can see that the employment of the total industrial clusters is more than 6 million in Zhejiang province. We have a lot of research focused on how the government's policy promote entrepreneurship and promote the development of the industrial clusters. But there are very limited research focused on the local government, especially the township government. How could township government do something to promote entrepreneurship and also the development of the medium or the small-sized enterprises? We have a case in Zhejiang province that's called Shanxiahu in tall industrial clusters. You can imagine that this is the map of the Zhejiang province, and this is a county named Zhejiang, and we have a township, small township, only 42 square kilometers population. You can see that the rural and the urban, but it projects 73% of the total world production of the pearl. It's about 80% of China's production. And we can see that the enterprises, over 2,000 million enterprises, and small size, medium size, and large size. And the export to the whole world, $0.18 billion in 2009. This is a picture of the freshwater pearl production, and this is how the local people involved in yeah. And they have a lot of young girls from hinterland rural area find a job in this factory to pick up the good quality pearl. And this is the market for the industrial. This is oh wow. I wish my wife could have some very expensive. Okay. Just this is the quick. During the Cultural Revolution, just one farmer apparently have the ability to raise this muscle and earn a limited amount of money. And then in year 1985, they have farmers. They have a market for this kind of products. The problem is that in 1986, central government said that's illegal because it's private one. So no such kind of thing should be closed down. At that time, 90% of the farmers in the whole town did the business with this kind of production and the market. So in 1987, the local township government asked one civil servant to resign, asking him to resign, and set up a so-called farmer market. That means sell vegetable or something. Actually, no, they sell all the pearl something. So local government do something, keep a blind and do something against the central government. And that time you can see that the trade volume something still illegal. In 1982, the local government, even the county government, level government, thinks that's the very good business. So the township government and the county level bureau, they opened another market. Still illegal. And then you can see not township, not county level, and also state-run enterprises they involved in. Oops, sorry. Okay. In 2000, you can see the fifth generation, and in the 2006, they have some companies from Hong Kong. They invest a lot. So we can see this is very interesting. This is the year. You can see number of the town-run farms. That means deal with the processing of the pearl. That decreased, and the private one increased. Another story. We can what the local government, I mean the township role in this kind of things. First, keep a blind eye to the. That's very important as a socialist country, right?
Get out of the way.
The second rule, they provide public goods. I mean that I&A and technology extension. The local government spent a lot of money. That's interesting. Okay. The third role is to build the market. You know, the local government involved in the early stage, and then later, after year 2000, the local government quit. Just the company from Hong Kong they involved in. No any share from the local government. That's interested. And we can see that how to keep the reputation. You know, at that time, a lot of dealers, they have some counterfeit products, and they have the obstructive trade, and the local government did a lot of things to guarantee that there are fair market. Also, local government build an industrial zone. That means that they spend a lot of money to pave the road, the electricity, water, something, and also they have finance assistance. Also, they have some tax rebate and fees in the initial stage, and just mention one thing. Zhejiang University, my school runs an MBA program, and local government subsidies the business owner to participate in the MBA program. That's very interesting. So then the logic, I mean that the future business just can let go the eggs. So what's other local government can learn from? I don't mean China. I mean there are a lot of enterprises and a lot of industrial clusters. I've been to India, to many countries. What can other people, other government can learn from this kind of experience? Okay, we have just findings, just very quick. Local government lowered the entry barrier. The first thing, another is lower the transaction cost, and also play a key role in the facing the crisis. I mean that the reputation, and then the help to update the cluster, and then also the local very big company also play a key role. That's all my research. Thank you very much.
When we set up this session, I really didn't know that pearls were going to be one of the key themes in the first two presentations. This one will deal not with pearls as a product, but pearls as a geographic region. Mohan Tadikanda is a faculty member in the School of Business, the Kelley School of Business at Indiana University, and he will talk about some of the implications for supply chain and research that he and his team have done here in China. Go on.
Well, thank you, Bruce, and Zhao Shang Hao. So good morning to you all. Let me start the show. Which one is?
That's it. Yeah, and it's far left.
Perfect. One of the items that has been discussed already several times today is the topic of indigenous innovation. Innovation by Chinese-owned, Chinese-run companies. This study that I have conducted with Chinese collaborators is all about indigenous innovation, trying to understand how the Chinese firms actually conduct product development. I have two objectives. First, to provide a summary of some field research that has recently been completed, although data analysis is still in process. Professor Jaffe told me I have 10 minutes, so this is indeed a summary. And I hope that this provides a little bit of a taste of what I and my team have been doing, and I'm happy to answer further questions offline as necessary because there is not much detail here. I also thought this might be an interesting opportunity to show as one example the collaboration between an Indiana University professor and Chinese colleagues. We know that Chinese firms are, of course, very significant in all forms of global supply chains. It is often perceived, particularly in the Western world, that Chinese manufacturers simply do subcontracting or sometimes knockoff copycat type products. But we also know that many Chinese firms are moving well beyond that to innovate and create new product designs, new product variants, truly newly engineered products, both for local and global markets. And this is where certain terms that I had not even known a few years ago come to play. Some firms are moving to original design manufacturing, not just contract manufacturing, but manufacturing of products with new designs where they have not been given the specifications. Some of these products might be somewhat incremental modifications, but they are still true new designs. And original brand manufacturing, which involves not only new product design, but also marketing efforts under brand names, which may have Chinese labels or Western type names, but they're still Chinese owned. There is actually very little up-close, deep understanding of how product development is done in indigenous Chinese companies. And that's part of what we wanted to do is to understand that. So the research question, really very simply, is how is product development conducted in Chinese firms, both internally and in terms of collaborations with customers and suppliers. So let me tell you these next couple of slides a little bit about the team, and let me explain my personal interest. I'm often assumed to be Indian, given my appearance and my name, and I tell people when they ask me what part of India you're from, I say a part of India called Texas. And so I was born in Austin, Texas. And I do have, coming from an Asian family, do have Asian tendencies and proclivities, but I'm an American guy. I've had wonderful opportunities to do field research in many Asian countries, including Indonesia, Singapore, South Korea, Hong Kong, and Japan. But until 2009, had never been inside a Chinese factory. This was a wonderful opportunity to get inside and to see this very important economy up close and hopefully to contribute to the academic literature. Being at Indiana University, I was very fortunate to have a sabbatical offered, which gave me the free time to spend months here in mainland China. The Chinese collaborators provide very, very important roles. One, they have the company contacts. I have contacts to many joint ventures and a few Chinese companies, but not many. This was essential to get access to the indigenous Chinese companies, and so the collaborators were key there. Also, important language skills. I do not know Putonghua, and so I needed them for asking the questions and as the next bullet says, interpreting not just the words, but also in the cultural and physical context. My particular roles were twofold. I have extensive experience in field research, being inside factories and R&D labs, and so that research methodology was unfamiliar to my collaborators, and I was able to work with them and train them by working on this project with them. Also, my research has been on product and process innovation, so I have a deep background in the literature on product development, and I was able to bring that to bear. The idea for moving forward on this project originated in a doctoral seminar at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. A few years ago, I was invited to give some sessions in this doctoral seminar. It was a great joy to do that. And through our brainstorming and ideas there, we decided to move forward on what turned out to be a multi-year project. So the research collaborators. First is Professor Jia Xiande, who is at the Chinese University of Hong Kong and also the South China University of Technology, a prominent engineering school, also has a business school and other schools based in Guangzhou. Professor Zhu Guilong, who is the Dean of the School of Business at the South China University of Technology, and Wang Shichang and Zhang Min, who at the time were PhD students, doctoral students who have now actually graduated. Our study context was the Pearl River Delta, and let me step back and say this is not because of lack of interest for the Shanghai Economic Zone or for the Zhejiang companies. In fact, we had preliminary interviews with some companies in this area. We started with 21 companies, and ultimately I'll present some of the results from 6. For logistical and access reasons, we decided to focus on the Pearl River Delta. But I believe that such a study could be conducted in any of the prominent industrial and economic regions of China. The Pearl River Delta is of particular interest because for those of you who are from here, know it is a very, very large industrial area with prominent export quantities and contributions to the PRC's commerce. I noted earlier about the interest in looking at indigenous product development. There really is very little literature, and I will show you a slide in a moment. And when there is literature on product development, it unfortunately uses Western-based theory and survey and research instruments without questioning their applicability in the Chinese cultural context. Lots of these theories have been based on the cultures of Western countries, and one can ask whether they should apply in a country like China. Bruce, do I have time to go through this in detail?
No.
No.
Oh, okay. Too bad. My primary purpose here is to show you that we did do a literature review. Some of the parts here in yellow are a few of the studies that come closest to what we do. But the bottom line is that there is essentially no research at the project and interior firm level looking at product development practices. I won't spend too much time on the methodology. We use a grounded theory building methodology, which involves the collection of multiple cases and the comparison of cases. Our unit of observation, the unit of analysis, is not actually the firm, but the development process for the main product line of the firm. We collect data through interviews with company personnel. So you see here 3 rounds of interviews, 75 hours, tape recorded, transcribed, and translated. Our primary informants were general managers, that is vice presidents and presidents of the companies, marketing managers, production managers, and people on the technology, engineering, and R&D side. Additional archival and public data was reviewed for each of these companies. How did we look for firms? Well, ultimately, this is truly a convenient sample. But we did try to find firms based on different industrial sectors, private versus state-owned, the location of the firm in the supply chain, whether they're more forward or backwards, whether they're an original equipment manufacturer or supplier, whether they make discrete assembled products, or whether they have continuous production processes, as is common for chemicals, and of course, provide access and openness to us. So these are the 6 companies. The first one, Machine, is a maker of plastic injection molding machine tools. There is a lot of production in the Pearl River Delta, the Guangdong area, which involves plastic parts, and so they are supporting some of this industry with their machine tools. Textile, historically, that region has been well known for producing clothing of all sorts, although that is diminishing lately. So this company makes thread and cloth. Plastics is a company that makes plastic parts for cell phones, consumer appliances, electronic appliances, and plastic parts like auto bumpers. You never believe it, but they're really, really big plastic parts. Electronics, which is a company that assembles cell phones and other consumer electronics. Chemical is a company that produces plastic resins and chemicals for use in making plastic, which then go into products. An appliance is a very prominent maker of consumer household appliances. They are the world's largest maker of microwave ovens. More than 50% of the Earth's microwave ovens come from their factories. So we used interviews, and our approach is the semi-structured interview protocol, which means that we start with some questions, but have follow-up questions which may not be on our list based on what we are told, hence semi-structured. I won't go through these in detail, but just want to give you a flavor of some of the questions that we had asked. About their product lines, about their project portfolios and their management processes, how they collaborate across different organizational functions within the firm. And somehow, there's a slide missing here, but there was a question about how the firm interacts with its customer and supplier partners. This leads to an immense amount of qualitative detail. 75 hours of interviews, it's just many, many pages of transcripts and lots of facts that need to be synthesized. And so there's coding and analysis where we as a team sit around the table and in various rounds summarize the information that we've heard, both within each company's situation and across the company's situations. So within case analysis is understanding descriptively what is happening within a company. Cross case is looking for patterns across the 6 companies. Once we understand patterns, then we can state research hypotheses or propositions for future large sample confirmatory tests. Out of the 6 companies, these 3 I will choose just for very, very quick examples of some of the things that we found. These 3 companies were very interesting because they actually constitute partners in the supply chain. We did not realize this as we started, but as we continued with the interviews, we found that they were interrelated. So we have the company that makes the plastic injection molding machines. We have the chemicals company that makes the plastic resins that these machines use to make plastic parts. And then we have a company that is a customer of both of these, the machine and the chemicals, that makes plastic parts in turn for other customers. So machine, they have a motto that we'll do something different, something new. Customers can show us their newly imported advanced machinery, and we can reverse engineer that product in the customer's plant. This is a company that has gained the technological understanding to very quickly disassemble and understand the mechanisms of some competitor's product that might be technologically advanced. They have gained such great skill at this that they are now ready to come up with their own designs. They say that there are labor grades in terms of their engineers, but really they are managed as a single group rather than separate engineering groups. The chemical company, again, makes plastic raw materials. Go to the third bullet here. The production process is highly standardized, but the customer, meeting the customer's needs happens in the choice of the raw materials, the choice of the ingredients that will go into what is ultimately the plastic pellet. This company does 2 things that are very interesting. Interacts with customers in different stages in the product's life, in concept generation, during the actual product development, and once the product is in the customer's hands, so even during the product usage stages. So they are interacting with the customer not just in one place, like say concept generation or in the traditional part of product development. The other thing that this company does, sometimes without its customers knowing, is work with other suppliers of the customer to optimize the chemicals as they may be used in various machines. And then of course, this is the plastics company that actually makes the plastic parts. I was quite impressed with this company because it really used a very integrated approach for managing their development efforts. Go to bullet 3 here. They observe the customer's customers, not just their immediate customers. So they make plastic parts for television sets, but they actually look at television set users to gain greater insight into the plastic parts. There is no thick wall between functions. There are no silos in this company. The different functional specialties do interact quite considerably. Those were examples of the within-case analysis. After doing within-case analysis, we do cross-case analysis where we look for patterns. Because of time, I'm cutting this really very short. The first part here is talking about the trends that we have seen in Chinese manufacturers. Let me spend a moment on the second and third parts here. One thing that we found very interesting is that these Chinese manufacturers are using the product development process as an opportunity to not only supply a part or material, but actually to work with other players in the supply chain network and to organize the different players, co-suppliers or suppliers to the firm, the focal firm, to be very adaptive to customers' needs where the customers might be quite distant. This is quite an opportunity for indigenous innovation and growth. The other thing is, as a Westerner, I found this quite striking. Internal collaboration is more difficult than external contract-based collaboration. What we typically say in the Western context is that a firm must learn to integrate its own different departments first before it can really work on integrating with external parties. We believe that based on some of the Chinese characteristics of respect for others and saving face, that it is actually easier for some Chinese firms to integrate with external parties than it is to conduct internal integration. This is perhaps a provocative finding and one that needs further study. So in the large, we have collected detailed observations about how companies conduct product development. Bruce, if I have 30 more seconds, let me cover this slide. So I said one of my objectives was not only to tell you about the research study, but to talk about the process of our own collaboration. And so let me share with you some observations, again, as an American guy. One thing that I learned is that the Chinese language is incredibly complicated. So I would go in with my Chinese colleagues to these interviews. My Chinese colleagues were very, very bright, professors, PhD students, unquestioned in their intellect. Then we would come back from the interview, and then the 3 or 4 of them would have a debate over what was said. Because there are so many nuances to the language. And this was new to me, and showed to me that one must have deep cultural understanding to conduct this kind of research. Another thing, and this I believe is common in Chinese culture, it also happens in the Indian culture sometimes. Often we would, for our interview, sit across from a panel of 5 or 6 or 7 managers, but only the most prominent manager would speak. Sometimes these interviews would last for 3 or 4 hours, and the others would not say a word. However, when we would go to lunch, then there was lots of talking and lots of learning. So we must be prepared to learn both in the formal interviews and in the informal meetings. The Chinese professor, the one who came to most of the interviews, Professor Zhejiang, did something that I found remarkable. At the end of our interviews, he would sometimes give a half-hour speech to the managers, providing them with recommendations on how they may improve their operations and product development. Typically in the West, we would not do this because we would be concerned that we are tainting our research subject. We might provide guidance after the research study is over, but not during the research study. However, this was part of the culture and the relationship between the university and these companies, and providing high-value advice immediately was valued by these companies and was considered quite appropriate by the professor. Again, this was new to me. I have a very big ego. I consider myself an expert in some subjects. So I thought, if he is providing advice, I should provide advice as well. I quickly learned that it was inappropriate. The Chinese people, just like the American people, are very proud, and they did not want an American to tell them how to run their businesses. So it was completely appropriate for the Chinese professor to provide advice, but it was not appropriate for me to do so. And so I quickly learned to not provide that advice. Number 5, I am more direct. Number 4, working with the PhD students, I found that they were much happier with statistical algorithms and algorithm-based research methods than ones which required judgment and qualitative synthesis. It took a while, literally, we worked together for 2 years, and they have learned to do this, but it was remarkably challenging for them. So thank you. I provide my contact information here if you have any further questions.
Now we'll have a presentation by the show Collaboration. We'll switch from an American to a Chinese, and Xiao Wen. Not so quick.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's my great pleasure to deliver my presentation. Just now I made a mistake, and someone will just stand here. And here also is a mistake. The title of my topic is The Determinants on the Development of Internationalization of the China's Enterprises, the evidence from the firm level survey data. As we all know that in the past few years, China just had a lot of introduction of FDI And now we just transfer to the ODI, so many companies in China moving out. This is the big change. And also, myself, I found that is the going global, from the going global to the running global. That means the speed of going out investment increased quickly. Third is great change from my nationality. I'm Chinese, so the first time when I was in UC Berkeley, a lot of professors asked me, are you Japanese? Because they think only the Japanese will just do some research work there. So I said, is the Japanese lady is as tall as I am? So the last year, the October, I went to the UC Berkeley by the way of the Indiana. I visited the museum, and some professor asked me, are you Chinese? And I was surprised to find that I changed my nationality from Japanese to Chinese because some of the salesmen want to do the promotion. They persuade me to buy the bottles of perfume. That's what the great change in China's economy. Now, here, the first I will just talk about the theory on the firm of the ODI. Our research based on the firm's survey data collaborate with the China Council for the promotion of international trade. If not with them, so I cannot get so many questionnaires because I have the 3,000 questionnaire delivered together with hereafter we call the CCTIT. My paper will just to have start with the literature, and that is the firm ownership advantage. When you invest abroad, the first you will just have the firm ownership advantage to get over of the disadvantage of the investment abroad. Second is the firm scale. For the large firm, they will do the green investment, and for the small one, they will have the joint venture. Then is internationalized experience. This is calculated in the past, so this is very important for us. And finally is the firm strategy. We will just to have the two aspects. One is just now for the mode, and second we will just focus on ODI performance. And Shaw and Chen, important factor they just found through survey paper of the 40 companies. The important factors they found is education level of the entrepreneurs. This is nothing to do with you just played a very important role in the foreign investment. Because China is the exception. During the Cultural Revolution, the people just have got the low education, but they still be the entrepreneurs in China. So they dare to go in abroad, but now I think the world is changing it. And internationalized experience, this is very important. Third is initial time of the firm establishment. And the earlier you just to invest abroad, the better performance they have got. And then is the competitive strategy of the firm, which has something to do with the technology advancement. And we also found there is unimportant factors, no matter how old you are or younger, there is nothing to do with doing the international. And the firm scale at the beginning or initial stage, there's nothing to do with the investment. Now, this we will have the framework. The first is the summary of the data from the CCPIT. Then is the firm scale, and we will get to the ownership, structure, or industry selection or regional selection. Now, we just to deliver the 3,000 questionnaires and 1,378 varied. Response rate of the 46%. And firm with overseas activities is 1,020. Account for the 74%. And 320 20 firms with the overseas investment account for the 23.2%. So judge from this data, we will find the firm scale is a must for the ODI of China's enterprises. You'll find in the middle, there is the 342,709 companies with the scale of the 10 million or 100 million. So from this, you will find the firm scale is must when you're going abroad. Then we will just get down to the further research. We found the internationalization of the non-state-owned enterprises. The average scale of the different ownerships, internationalization activities, you will find the private, the sample is the most. While you will find the state-owned is not as many as the private enterprises. You know, our province is very typical for the private enterprises. The private enterprises involved a lot, but as a matter of fact, the average scale is much smaller. Judged from this picture, you can guess that is the 6.0. And the state-owned enterprises, for those small number is 92, but you will find 44.7. That is the large scale. And later we will find, after the analysis, the internationalization of the enterprises concentrates on the labor incentive industries. Just from this picture, you'll find the number 2. That is the textile and textile products accounts for the 19.50% with 132 firm numbers. And later we will find here is in the middle. That is the 18.17%, and the 123 number of the firms. So this tells us that still we will concentrate on the labor-intensive enterprises. And regional distribution of the internationalization is concerned. We will find that China will go to the Asian countries investment. Then we will find the US and Europe. These 3 will be the top places or regions for the China to go global to invest in these countries. US always number 1, you will find 80.0%. And then we will find the very interesting phenomenon that is Vietnam always is the place that China will invest. And we use the logistic regression. I use the tab 1, tab 2, tab 3, and tab 4. I will just leave you to read our papers. So we get the impact on the ODI mode from the scale. We use the variables. We just use the assets, employments, sales of revenue. And internationalize the experience. We use the years from the first internationalization. And domestic incentives, we just to going global policy of China. Going global policy of China years ago, but now it's the second wave. The government just called companies to going abroad after the crisis in 2007 to 2008. And I think that is going out policy of China's government, domestic labor cost pressures, and host country incentive, that is market potential of host country and R&D capacity of the host countries, and favorable policies of the host countries, and illusion of the trade barrier. The other factors, the weather, CCPIT, that is China Council for the Production of International Trade. Are they the members? Or those firms have got the FDI from foreign countries? All these will have the impact on the ODI mode. So here you will find I use the double black, that is very outstanding, you can just see. So the first is direct investment. The experience is very important. Also the cooperative investment, merge, and acquisition. These three also we use the experience, and we use the assets in the cooperative or merge, and we use the revenue in the cooperative investment and merge. So this is too big, I just use three, and you can refer to my paper. It's too big. If I use small one, then you cannot read it. Now, regression result, we have got the factors that have impact on the direct investment mode. We found internationalization, the internationalized experience is very important, and China going global, and policies or market, the potential of the host country, and R&D capacity of the host countries, and the value of the own brand and the evolution of the trade barrier. If the factors have impact on the joint venture, then we found after analysis, the firm asset, the market potentials of the host country, R&D capacity of the host countries, and internationalized experience, or the firm sales, and China going global. And the value of the own brand, as well as the favorable policy of the host country, are very important factors. And factors that have the impact on merge and acquisition modes, the firm asset and the firm sales market potentials of host countries, and the value of the own brand, and whether recipient of FDI are factors. So this impact, here we will impact on the ODI. We will have domestic incentive that is going out, the policy. And we will have the domestic labor pressure, plays very important. Host country incentives, we will find that the market potential of the host country, brand availability of the host countries, and favorable policy from the host countries, and evolution of the trade barrier. And other factors, we will have the whether they are the CCPIT members, and whether the recipients of the FDI and experience of the ODI are very important. So here, I just pick out those who are not outshining, but not right, and I use the model 2 or model 1 and model 2 to have this. And second, we will have the regression result. There is domestic labor cost pressure, and the favorable policies from the host country have no significant impacts on the firm performance. The first is mode. The second, we will talk about investment performance. So there is no significant impacts on the performance. And the experience of ODI and going out policies of China governments are the most important factors among all the explanatory variables. So finally, let's come to the conclusion because we are pressing for time. The factors that have the impact on the ODI mode is the internationalized experience, China's going out policy, market potentials of the host countries, and R&D capacity of host countries. The second is going global policies of China government accelerates the impulse of the ODI of the China's enterprises to trigger merge and acquisition and ODI. Third is about the impact of the internationalization performance. We follow the show and turn and confirm that the internationalization experience and accumulation of the internationalized experience will increase the possibility of the firm success during the development of the internationalization of the China's enterprises. Finally, we found from the comparison of other factors, we found that policy of the host country are the increasing the production cost doesn't impose the impact on the firm's operation of the performance during the internationalization process. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoy your stay in Hangzhou. Thank you.
Our fourth presentation this morning will be from Professor Jeffrey Hart of the Political Science Department at Indiana University, focusing on the flat panel display industry, one particular industry here in China. Thank you.
Okay, I don't have time for a joke, so just laugh anyway. Okay. I'm going to talk about the flat panel display industry and where China may be in it. I would love to have some Chinese collaborators because I did research on the United States, Western Europe, Japan, Korea and Taiwan, and the Taiwanese province of China. And so now I need collaborators to study the Chinese phase. So what this talk is about is China's entry into this very important, very big, very lucrative in some respects, although very competitive industry, and some of the issues that may come up for China as it develops its own approach to entering this industry. This is a big industry, so this is a chart about the total market for displays, which includes CRTs, cathode ray tubes, plasma displays, and all those things on the right side. You can see that liquid crystal displays have become the biggest part of the display industry. Although we now have these AM OLEDs, the active matrix organic light emitting diodes that you have in your smartphones. Those are important, and there are many commonalities between LCD technology and AM OLED. This shows you what the applications of the so-called TFT LCD, which is the biggest part of the LCD market, and you can see that TV is a growing part of the total market in terms of units, and more importantly is an increasing part of the revenues in the display market. And this is really relevant for China, partly because it has a big internal market. Actually, this is one way that China can develop its domestic market. It doesn't really have to because people want to buy these TVs. Turns out I have some statistics from Corning, China, which says that the installed base of televisions in China is 435 million sets, and compared to the US, 300 million. The total annual TV market in China is 46 million, whereas the total annual market in the US is 40 million. So you don't have to wait for China to overtake the US in the TV market. But the big difference is that only 13% of TVs in China are LCD TVs, whereas it's already 35%. Actually, I think it's higher now. So let me move on to that. So if we look at total world sales of TVs, that green stuff is LCD TVs, and they're taking over the TV market, basically. So plasma displays are growing a little bit, but not nearly as fast as LCD. And if we look at the share of flat panel TVs by country and region, you can see that Japan was the leader in terms of the switch over to flat panel TVs. That includes plasma and LCD. And North America, a little bit behind. Western Europe is actually closer to Japan than North America. But that, let's see, the China line is the orange, okay? So you see a very, very rapid increase in the share of the TV market that is now flat panels, and so hence, in other words, a lot of demand in China for this type of display, and consequently opportunities for Chinese firms to supply the demand. If we look at the production shares of TFT LCDs by location between 1993 and 2005, you see just the little black thing at the end there, that's the Chinese share of production, okay? So this is early days. I think it's gone up to about 8%, but the two leaders are still Korea and Taiwan, which is kind of an interesting thing. We see, if you included the US, it would have gone from 100% to 0 before the Japanese decline, but considerably before it. But basically, at the expense of Japan, Korea's and Taiwan's TFT LCD business has grown rapidly. Oh, I guess I do have the purple, which purple for the U.S. Okay, so here are the major players. As of 2011, Sharp of Japan is still a very important firm, although obviously the Japanese share of the total market has gone down. Sharp and all the other Japanese firms have diversified out of what they call commodity displays for laptops and computer monitors, and they've focused in on the more high value added end of the display market, smaller unit numbers and higher profit margins. Korea, it's Samsung, LG, Philips, which is a joint venture between LG and the European company Philips. And then there's a joint venture between Sony and Samsung, which is also a big player in Korea. In Taiwan, we have AU Optronics, or AUO, Chime Optoelectronics, CMO, Hanstar, Quanta Display, and Chunghwa Picture Tubes, also called CPT. In the US, there's no major manufacturer of TLCD. In China now, we have at least 4 firms entering the market: Beijing Orient Electronics, or BOE, Chenmao, which I guess is here, right? Shanghai. TCL Huaxing, and CEC Panda. I will talk about that a little bit more. I did want to talk about the fact that this is a generation-driven industry technologically. The mother glass, the glass on which you deposit displays, keeps getting bigger and bigger. We're now in generations 8 and 9. In generation 7, it was almost a 2 meter by 2 meter. Now they're just a little bit bigger. And the idea of having a bigger mother glass is to be able to make multiple displays. And in this case, if you're doing 50-inch LCD TVs, you want to have a really big mother glass to make multiple TV displays on. And I'll actually, well, okay, here's a generation 7 to 8 TFT plant, and this is the LG plant in Paju in South Korea. This is what they look like. They're like, I consider them to be kind of like cathedrals, factory cathedrals. This one cost $3 billion. And you have one in China. There's a generation 8.5 plant in Shenzhen, TCL Huaxing. You also have a generation 7.5 plant, which is actually an AUO plant in Jiangsu province. But the other Chinese plants are mostly earlier generation plants. And that could be a problem because if you look at what is the generation for the plant that sells different types of displays, you can see that it helps to have a later generation plant to sell more LCD TVs competitively. So basically, in order to make those big TV displays, you really need those big mother glass plants, and that's a challenge. And it's one that so far only one Chinese-owned plant and one Korean plant, Taiwanese plant that has invested in China, in mainland China, has so far tackled. So this is a challenge, I think, for the industry. That's a picture of what a big panel. This is a generation 6, so that's not 2 meters by 2 meters yet. But you can imagine the difficulties of handling that huge piece of glass. And also, you don't want to have a bad result for a huge piece of glass like that. So wastage could be a real problem if you have an inefficient plant. There's a huge amount of learning that goes into making these plants work effectively. And basically, internationalization is a kind of essential part of this industry. This is a very globalized industry. So I have one slide that kind of points that out. If you look at who dominates the glass supply business for the special kind of glass that's needed for plants, they're Corning and Asahi Glass and Shot Glass from Europe are the major manufacturers, and I believe that Corning China is the main supplier. But I don't know whether I need to know. If you guys can help me out, I'd like to know where the Chinese plants are getting their glass from, besides Corning, and how that's working out. The tools here are very specialized. In the U.S., we have Applied Technology and Photon Dynamics, which are still supplying the major producers. Japan has Canon, Nikon, and Shimatsu. Tokyo Electron are major tool makers, and in Europe it's Unaxis. Anyway, none of these firms could remain internationally competitive without working with these suppliers and materials firms. So by its very nature, this industry requires that the successful players have a kind of international outlook and a willingness to cooperate with other countries. So, to summarize, China is the latest country to enter the market for TFT LCD displays. Korean and Taiwanese firms are the market leaders. Chinese firms have not invested heavily in the latest generation plants, but are on the edge of doing so, and I think they will. I don't see any reason why they won't. There are difficulties that have to be overcome, and so one problem could be too much confidence in your own ability. We have this problem too. We have a not invented here problem in American firms, and we have sort of what we call economic nationalism. And economic nationalism is like the bane of competitiveness in this particular industry. The firm that impressed us the most in our field research was LG. LG had no not invented here at all. Very cosmopolitan. We're reaching out to everybody in order to get the best stuff and to do it at the most cost-effective way. So my conclusion is all TFT LCD firms must work with world-class producers of materials and manufacturing equipment to be competitive, and more importantly, they have to work with their end customers to produce the kinds of displays that they want. Some of these firms produce final products, but many of them, actually one of the things I noticed about the Chinese firms was that big integrated firms were getting involved in the manufacturing of TFT LCD panels, and that may not necessarily be a good strategy. You might want to at least have those divisions act like merchant firms trying to be competitive with other flat panel producers regardless of the end customer. Anyway, just to finish up with another ad, I am the North American editor of the International Journal of Digital Television. I have these little cards to give out. We need manuscripts. Is anybody here doing research on digital TV in China or anywhere else in the world? Please send us manuscripts. And also, I'm on the editorial board of the Journal of Information Technology and Politics. And so if you're working in that area, I know somebody's doing something on digital divide. So again, I'm soliciting manuscripts. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We've had presentations dealing with very small firms, and in the last presentation, very large firms as well. And now we're very privileged to have a venture capitalist, Matthew Knapp, who can summarize this and integrate it all very effectively. Mr. Knapp.
Well, whether I can ably summarize it or not, I will do it very briefly, I can assure you. I am, as Bruce mentioned, I'm a venture capitalist. I'm also trained as a lawyer and have been an entrepreneur in the past. And so the concept Dr. Kennedy advanced this morning about rules-based relationships appeals to me because business depends on the clarity of the rules. As an entrepreneur, if you tell me what the rules are, I will play the game by those rules, and I will try to make money at it, whatever the game is. So the rules are driven by the culture and the sense of fair play in China with regard to developing businesses here. So what may be lacking is not the sense of culture or the sense of fair play, but just the clarity needed to foster more innovation. So I think that the best way to advance the relationship between the U.S. and China is frankly to identify areas where we can help one another and where our needs are most immediate. There are two categories that occurred to me as I heard this morning's presentations. The first was entrepreneurship. Dr. Yi's studies in the pearl market I thought were absolutely fascinating, and how farmers markets have sprung up, and the role of the blind eye of government at times to allow innovation to spread. Dr. Tadakanda alluded to indigenous innovation and the powerful opportunities that currently exist within the infrastructure of China. Dr. Wen touched on the growth and internationalization of Chinese companies and the heavy impact of Chinese going out policies on overseas direct investment. And then Dr. Hart's observations about LCD flat screen, and I think that nicely illustrates how products can become commoditized, which basically eliminate the United States from a competitive position because of our labor costs until the next level of disruptive innovation occurs. And that does happen repeatedly within the United States economy. We are fond of referring to creative destruction, and that is the process where something will mature to the point that it essentially collapses upon itself. It's no longer economic for us to make flat screen televisions. But we'll come up with an idea for an entirely different kind of television, and that will create a new market and a brand new entrepreneurial opportunity within the United States. And this has frequently happened in the U.S. in times of recession. If you look in the Depression era, in the 1930s in the United States, that was when the firm Hewlett-Packard was created in the garage of Mr. Hewlett and Packard. The recession in the 70s led to the creation of Microsoft. And so it's the disruptions in the labor and job markets in the United States and the economy at large sometimes lead to bursts of entrepreneurial activity. And I suspect that you will see that coming out of the United States in a new way in the next 10 years or so. The second area where I think that there are massive opportunities for collaboration and where we have very similar needs that entrepreneurs can address has to do with healthcare. And this is my particular focus right now is healthcare. Yesterday we went to see the Romance of the Sung Dynasty, the kind of the amusement park historical site, and I was struck by the number of children there who were having a wonderful time. They were with their parents and their grandparents, and that's something that we all have in common. And then you see the elderly who are in need of a lot of care later in life, and that too is a problem that the United States is struggling with. Our older population as the baby boomers age into a higher need for health care. That's a commonality that our cultures have. That's also a business opportunity that we are very interested in, and I suspect that there are a lot of Chinese that are thinking about the same thing. We can work together to address those shared human problems. This is not like rare earth metals. This is not a zero-sum game. This is something where we all have a problem that we can address together and make successful business opportunities out of it. Thank you very much.
Might have time for maybe one comment or question.
I have a question for Professor Kikonda. You mentioned that the internal collaboration of Chinese firm is quite difficult, while the external collaboration is relatively easy. Then you mentioned that the Chinese characteristics is maybe play an important role. So I think you could you speak a little bit more about this and speak it more explicitly? What kind of characteristics will make an important role?
Well, I'd be happy to, but I also look forward to your feedback because you are the Chinese. within the Chinese workplace, it is very common for Chinese professionals to show great respect to each other and to not want to create a situation of public conflict when there might be disagreement or challenge about how to move forward. Integrating functional organizations, different specialties that have not been integrated before, is challenging in any environment because of different terminology, language, performance measures, socializations, and so forth. So based on our findings, and again with the help of my Chinese collaborators, we came to the conclusion that these firms found it easier to have external relationships, contract-based, and could integrate with the customer or supplier more easily than they could integrate internally. That having been said, we had one example out of the 6 which was contrary to this, highly integrated internally, has a very, very charismatic CEO who believes very strongly in cross-functional integration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I guess the next part of the agenda is lunch.